Welcome, it is Mitch. I am on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. Reaction to the Packers escaping Chicago with a win. Usually I have the instant reaction videos up half hour, 40 minutes after the game goes final. I told you guys last week wasn't going to be in front of the microphone or the camera until Monday, so we're getting this one out as quickly as we can. I would love to sit here and just celebrate and sort of laugh at the Bears being the Bears and finding ways to lose, seemingly in only ways that Chicago can find to do. I would like to celebrate Carl Brooks and the blocked field goal that allowed Green Bay to leave Soldier Field with a 2019 victory and move to 7-3 on the season. We'll get to all that, and never going to complain about a Packers win. It'd be foolish to do so when you only get 17 cracks at this thing in the regular season as you try to crawl towards the playoffs. So I'm never going to complain about the Packers winning a game, but there are things that lie within the 60 minutes from the first quarter to the fourth quarter that are still worrisome to me. Like, there are still issues with this team that just aren't going away. And perhaps you were expecting me to start out on a bright, overly optimistic outlook, laughing at Chicago. It is somewhat difficult for me to do that. Look, it's awesome that the Packers have beat the Bears 11 times in a row. It's the largest win streak in this rivalry ever for either team. The previous high was the Packers winning 10 in a row. I think that wasn't that in the 90s, the early to mid-90s. Now they've won 11 in a row, and it's awesome. And that's why you can't complain about the win, but things that happened within the game still pose problems, because I want to look at the big picture with this team. And the big picture is, can you make a run to New Orleans in February? Because I look around the NFC and I see vulnerability. I see a San Francisco 49ers team that is not nearly as good as the San Francisco 49ers teams of years past. Are they still scary? Yes, they come to Lambeau Field this weekend for a major matchup. But it's a San Francisco team that's lost to Arizona at home, an NFC West rival. They just lost to Seattle at home, an NFC West rival. They've already lost to the LA Rams. They're sitting at 5-5. Every time I think San Francisco is about to figure it out and become the San Francisco we've become so accustomed to seeing throughout the years, they take a step back, and they took a step back on Sunday. I look at Atlanta, who was 6-3 2 weeks ago. Now they're 6-5 after losing to a Saints team that had lost 7 in a row 2 weeks ago, and then getting absolutely dismantled on the road in Denver on Sunday. Yet they're still leading the NFC South. I look at Philadelphia, who's leading the NFC East, and it's a good Philadelphia team, but they're beatable, and it's not the Philadelphia team that we saw in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. I don't think they're playing to that level. You've heard me say the cream of the crop in the NFC is Detroit, but I'm just looking around, and I see an opportunity for Green Bay. I see a real chance. Dallas, laugh at them all you want, usually a playoff team. They're out of it. 3-6, 3-7, 3-6 playing Houston on Monday night. They're out of it. San Francisco 5-5. Who knows? Like, right now, the division leaders are Arizona, Atlanta, Philly, and then Detroit. Like, there's a chance for Green Bay. That's why, as much as I want to celebrate the win over Chicago, there's plenty to still clean up on if you're Green Bay. And for me, I don't even know if this needs cleaning up on. This is where we're going to start. It's the pass rush. It's just not happening. 10 games to me is a large enough sample size to recognize that this pass rush is just not happening. It's not going to happen this year. And when I say it's not going to happen this year, I'm talking about that group ever developing into something great. It's not going to be a great pass rush this year. If it was a good pass rush, I'd be thrilled. It's not even that. They had 3 sacks of Caleb Williams on Sunday. 2 came on that final drive for the Bears, which they eventually got into field goal range. It was a Bears offensive unit that allowed 9 sacks their previous game to New England. They've allowed the second most sacks in the NFL this year. And statistically, Caleb Williams had in this game his lowest pressure rate of any game this season against Green Bay on Sunday. Now, some of that can be credited to the Bears' game plan, which was, Shane Waldron's out, offensive coordinator's fired. New sheriff in town, at least for the time being, for the Bears. And some of it can be credited to them getting the ball out of Caleb Williams' hand quickly. And they did that with quick screens, passes to the perimeter, just trying to get him comfortable and just, hey, pass completion on simple throws to try to get him some confidence and get him in a rhythm. However, there were plenty of times in that game on Sunday where it was not a quick pass, where Caleb Williams took a 5-step drop, took a 3-step drop, and he had all day to throw. I mean, all day. Clean pocket. So much so that he was like, hey, Green Bay secondary still holding it down. I'm just going to take off and run. Like, Green Bay could not contain Caleb Williams. Shame on me for not having this stat in front of me. That had to be the most rushing yards he's had in a game so far this year. And Chicago did mix in some read option where Caleb Williams on a couple of occasions tucked it himself and took off and ran. But they couldn't contain him. They couldn't get pressure on him. I'm calling the spade a spade. 10 games, large enough sample size when you play 17. It's not going to be a great pass rush this year for Green Bay. And really, it's not on the outside anymore. It's leaking into the interior, because I thought in the early portions of the season before his injury, and he has since returned, Devontae Wyatt was really boosting up the interior of the defensive line with his pressure numbers and his quarterback hits and his quarterback sacks. He's been quiet the last couple of games. Kenny Clark, I don't remember the last time I saw Kenny Clark have a quarterback hit. Sure as hell didn't have one against Chicago. I don't remember him having one against Detroit. Don't remember one in Jacksonville. Kenny Clark, a guy you rely on the interior of that defensive line, and you give him a tag team partner in Devontae Wyatt who has shown flashes. You thought it could be a good duo. You thought Devontae Wyatt could unlock more of Kenny Clark with teams not being able to solely focus on Clark on the interior. Haven't seen really much of anything from Kenny Clark, which is really disappointing. And so it's starting to leak in those pass rush issues, that was a tongue twister, to the interior, because I've harped on it over and over again. The lack of success we've seen from Rashawn Gary, who did get one Sunday against Chicago on that final drive for the Bears. And Preston Smith is gone. And Kingsley Enagbare and Lucas Van Ness, it just hasn't happened. But now it's on the interior of the defensive line as well. And I get there was an offensive coordinator change for Chicago, and I thought that would give them a jolt, and it did. Still the same pieces you're working with, primarily on the offensive line. And for the most part, they held their own against the Packers on Sunday, which was, to me, just super disappointing, because this could very well rear its ugly head come postseason time, when you're not playing the Bears, but you're playing Detroit, you're playing Philadelphia, and if you give Jalen Hurts all day to throw in the pocket, and you give Jared Goff all day to throw in the pocket, they're going to make you pay, because they have weapons like Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta. You don't get pressure on Caleb Williams, you don't get pressure on Trevor Lawrence, it's one thing. You don't get pressure in the playoffs on Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, it's going to kill you. It could end your season. And Green Bay, 10 games, outside of the Tennessee game, it's been, I'd say, subpar, below average. I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, they might still have flashes in games, but I'm talking about a consistent pattern. I don't think it's going to happen with the pass rush, and my fear is that it comes back to bite them in the ass at some point in time in the playoffs when you're playing the best of the best. The domino effect that the lack of a pass rush is having on the rest of the defense is showing now too. This was an aggressive, opportunistic team that led the league in turnovers forced in the first, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks of the NFL. They haven't forced one in the last 2 weeks. I give Caleb Williams his props. He hasn't thrown an interception in a few games. And Detroit, again, is a different animal. But we saw Jared Goff throw 5 picks against Houston 2 weeks ago. And the week prior to that in Lambeau Field, didn't have a single turnover. And so Goff and Detroit, they're capable of turning it over. Green Bay didn't force any 2 games ago. Didn't force any against Chicago on Sunday. And so I think the domino effect is you don't have a pass rush. You're relying heavily on your secondary and heavily on the linebackers to kind of do it all. If you get a pass rush and it hits home, quarterbacks are forced to make dumb decisions sometimes, forced to kind of roll the dice in certain moments, and that's where you can force some of those turnovers. Pass rush helping out the secondary. Pass rush isn't helping out the secondary here. Green Bay hasn't forced a turnover in 2 weeks. So that domino effect to me is starting to shine a little brighter, and it's not a good light that's being cast upon the defensive front for Green Bay. Preston's gone. I thought Brenton Cox obviously showed something in a small snap count total. The one guy I'm going back to right now, it's easy to point at Rashawn Gary because of the contract. I'm not going to live in someone else's pockets. Lucas Van Ness. What the hell? He's invisible. Lucas Van Ness is invisible. And there was something that stood out to me glaringly in the snap count totals from Sunday, and we'll have that in Tuesday's video, and it circulates around Lucas Van Ness. But even when he's on the field, it's nothing. I mean, it's one thing to get a sack, but if you could dial up a pressure, flush Caleb Williams out of the pocket, flush Jared Goff out of the pocket, get Trevor Lawrence out on the run, try to make them uncomfortable, I would take that from Lucas Van Ness at this point. He isn't doing anything, and he's only in year 2. He's not playing starter snaps. So for that reason, I'm going to try to hold out some hope that he can figure it out and become the first-round pick that the Packers envisioned him to be on the field, but it is not good so far. Like, Lucas Van Ness has been more than underwhelming. He's invisible, hasn't done anything. And to me, when you look around the core of that unit on the exterior of the defensive line for Green Bay, Rashawn Gary sure hasn't really packed a punch this year, nearly to the extent we've seen in the past. But Lucas Van Ness is in his second year now and really hasn't shown a whole hell of a lot. You could make a case in his limited snap count totals from last year that he had more of an impact than he did this year. And if you're taking a step back, or you're just staying on that same line in your second year compared to your first, that's not good for a first-round pick. He's the one I'm overly disappointed in. I look at Kingsley Enagbare, and he had a couple frustrating plays yesterday where it looked like he could have had a couple of sacks and just whiffed or couldn't finish the play. When I watch Enagbare personally, I'm watching him win at a rate that I'm fine with, but he needs to finish off plays better. That's where his inconsistency has kind of funneled into his play. He'll win at the line of scrimmage at a rate I'm okay with. He has trouble really nailing home and finishing the play. And that's where the frustration lies with him. But at least he's able to get pressure on the quarterback once in a while. With LVN, not seeing it at all. Like I said, it's having a ripple effect to the second and third layers of this defense. Like, I'm so good on seeing Keyshawn Nixon on the outside. Even when it was going good, I said I didn't think it was sustainable. Jeff Hafley's sticking with it. I don't see it. I don't see Keyshawn Nixon vibing as an outside corner. And it's not even his own fault. It's just it doesn't suit him. But Green Bay keeps rolling out with it. I'm good. I've seen enough of it. We'll talk more about that in the snap count video too, because Jair only played, I think it was 10 snaps before exiting, the knee injury flaring up or lingering for him. I'm so glad Green Bay moved on from Joe Barry. It wasn't a good fit. It wasn't working. Jeff Hafley had things cruising early on in the year, although there were issues. I'm wondering, is the honeymoon phase wearing off for any of you? I like Jeff Hafley. I think he's a good defensive coordinator. I think he will continue to be a good defensive coordinator. But when you're not getting home with 4, and you're not a team that typically is going to blitz a lot, and I think they blitzed 11 times I saw. It didn't seem like that. They blitzed 10 or 11 times on Sunday against Chicago. But when you're not getting home with 4, I think it's one thing to look at your opponent, and if you're playing, Buffalo, like Josh Allen thrives when teams bring pressure, which is kind of crazy. But if you're not getting home with 4 against a Josh Allen, and you're like, well, if we bring pressure, we could really get burnt, I kind of get that. But Chicago's offense has been the poster child of ineptitude this year, of incompetence this year. And so on Sunday to bring 4, and it's not hitting home early, and to continue to do it over and over again, they did allow Caleb Williams to get comfortable. And that's kind of where I have more irritation with how Green Bay rolled out a game plan against Chicago, albeit a win. I would have liked to see them ratchet up more pressure, try to make Caleb Williams more uncomfortable, because how many times did you see Caleb Williams uncomfortable against Green Bay on Sunday? And then compare that to what we saw against New England. Compare that to what we saw when Chicago played Arizona the week prior to that. It's not working. It's one of the things that's not working. And when you're not hitting home on the quarterback, it's going to be harder to force turnovers. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Appreciate all the support. Packers beat the Bears on Sunday 20-19. Carl Brooks with one of the big paws. got a mid up there, deflected the kick off the right foot, the right swinging leg of Cairo Santos, and Green Bay wins to move to 7-3 on the season. I had told you guys I was worried about this game going into it because of the Waldron firing, and I thought it would give the Bears some juice, similar to what we saw when the Saints lost 7 in a row, fired Dennis Allen, and then beat Atlanta, who was 6-3 at the time. Where I was somewhat surprised in the game was that Chicago didn't do anything special, and yet they were moving the ball pretty effectively. They weren't taking shots downfield. I have no clue why the Packers didn't sit on the short routes and try to force Chicago's hand, make Caleb Williams beat you deep. He did pepper in a nice pass downfield to Cole Kmet, where Green Bay had someone over the top and underneath, and it was just a great pass by Caleb Williams in the second half of that game. He tried to hit Rome Odunze deep on one where Keyshawn Nixon slipped up. They were just a little step off. But why Green Bay wasn't sitting on the short stuff? Because there were a couple of times where it was snap to Caleb Williams, immediately throw it to DJ Moore. He has a blocker or two set up, and then DJ Moore also, just with the shifty hips, is making guys miss, and it's 7, 8, 9-yard gains. And I don't know why they didn't try to force that more. Is what it is. You know, hindsight's also 2020. But going into this game, weren't we kind of like, hey, pressure this rookie quarterback. If you get beat deep, so be it. Chicago was just kind of nitpicking and taking their short little gains and the runs by Caleb Williams when nothing was open on the intermediate stuff, and it worked. So I thought the Shane Waldron firing would have Chicago trying to air it out more, but they really didn't need to. Again, Green Bay wins the game, but Chicago was having success because Green Bay wasn't really pushing things up towards the line of scrimmage, at least when I went back and watched even a second time. It wasn't near to the extent we saw with Joe Barry as the DC, but still frustrating for Green Bay. Last thing, too, because there are positives to talk about from this game. The other issue, there was another Jordan Love interception. This wasn't one of the dumb ones. This was not a dumb interception. This was just a bad throw by Jordan Love. And you have 3 points in your back pocket. You can go up 10-3 in the second quarter, and he sails a pass well over the head of Tucker Kraft, and it's picked off at the 1-yard line. Like, I can sit here and say, just make the throw, and it sounds super simple, right? But for an NFL quarterback, it was as simple of a throw as it gets. Tucker Kraft was not moving. Tucker Kraft sat down in the zone defense. He was wide open. There was no one around him, and it was a short pass. It wasn't like Jordan Love was left hash going back across his body to the right hash. Jordan Love, it was a very, very easy throw to make. He was not pressured in the pocket. He just sailed it, and those are going to happen, but again, they happen too frequently. I guess the saving grace is I get more upset with the dumb interceptions. It wasn't a dumb throw, a dumb read. It was just a bad one. It was a bad throw by Jordan Love, and you can't have it when you have 3 points in your back pocket. So now that we've got that stuff out of the way, here's a couple positives. Penalties weren't an issue. Penalties have been really, really setting Green Bay back throughout the season. Did they only have 3 or 4? There weren't, and one of them was a BS one, Xavier McKinney getting a late hit call on Caleb Williams, where I don't know if he took more than one acting class at USC, but tip of the cap to him because he sold it. He sold it in a very Mahomes way and got the flag against Green Bay. But penalties were not a big issue in this one, which you talk about a growing concern with this team. And I said in one of my videos last week, you kind of get to a point, like I said, 10 games with the pass rush is now a large enough sample size where I just know it's not going to be a great pass rush. And I'm hoping and praying it can be a good pass rush. I don't even know if they're going to get to that point. The penalties were getting to a stage with Green Bay where I was wondering like, aloud, is this just a penalty-ridden team? Is this a team that's going to just shoot itself in the foot? And you're going to have to hope that they can overcome those sorts of things. It was better against Chicago. They didn't have many penalties. They didn't have big ones really outside of the 2nd and 1. That was an incomplete pass, but Elton Jenkins, what was it, a illegal man downfield or whatever, moved into 2nd and 6. 2 plays later, they throw the interception. But the penalties were not something that hung over Green Bay like a dark cloud in this one. And dropped passes were starting to worry me. They only had 1, but they only passed it 17 times. But I'll still take it. I'll push aside the 17 pass attempts, and I will phrase this in a way by saying Green Bay only dropped 1 pass against the Bears, and that's good. Josh Jacobs, too, like, that 2nd and 1 at the 5 in Green Bay, passed it. It was incomplete, and there was a flag. And then 2nd and 6, they try to reverse with Jaden Reed, minus 5 yards, and then it's 3rd and 11, and Love throws the pick. I don't understand that sequencing. Again, I know hindsight's 2020, but But on that drive, Green Bay gets it to the Chicago 5-yard line, and it's 2nd and 1. That drive was set up by a long pass to Christian Watson, but also by runs of 23, 9, and 7 yards by Josh Jacobs. Why not 2nd and 1 at the 5? Just hand it off to Josh Jacobs. Your offensive line has been paving holes. He's been reading them left and right. Chicago's not getting the push at the line of scrimmage. Why not hand it off to Josh Jacobs? Trust that he can get at least 1 yard. Hell, maybe he gets all 5 and waltzes into the end zone for 6, but he can get you a yard there, and then you can reset 1st and goal at the 4. Instead, Green Bay 2nd and 1 goes pass incomplete. There's a penalty, 2nd and 6. Reverse to Jaden Reed, -5 yards, 3rd and 11, interception. Like, Josh Jacobs was running too well even up to that point in the second quarter where it's like, just feed the dude. Like, he's been so damn good for Green Bay these last few weeks and really throughout the season, but it's really starting to catch fire with him in the last couple of games. Like, Josh Jacobs' style of running is going to translate swimmingly into these cold weather games. There was a run in that game that I absolutely loved. I did not notice it until they showed the replay from the back angle during the broadcast. Josh Jacobs ripped off a big run, and he was waving Jalen Johnson, Chicago corner. He was waving him in as he was still running the ball, like, come hit me, like, let's get some contact here, and tried, like, lowering the shoulder a little bit. I absolutely loved that. He's a physical runner. He's not, like, rare are going to be the home run hits with Josh Jacobs, but he always falls forward. Always falls forward. And he has really started to settle into this offense that Matt LaFleur has in Green Bay, and it's been a great marriage with Josh Jacobs and the Packers, especially these last few weeks. 76 rush yards, 58 receiving yards, had a touchdown, and again, I just loved where he waved in Jalen Johnson for some contact. Lean on him more. Lean on him more. Don't be afraid to feed Josh Jacobs. He can be a bell cow. I'm not suggesting you give him the amount of totes that he had against Tennessee and even in the game against Indianapolis, but in situational football, 2nd and 1 at the 5 where he's been running it down Chicago's throats, why try to even get cute and pass it? Just turn around and give him the ball. He always falls forward. He'll get you the yard, move the sticks. It's 1st and goal at the 4. Then you can reset. I just cannot say enough about how great Josh Jacobs has been. And then I want to finish up with this. I think special teams coordinator Rich Bisaccia has had plenty of scrutiny. I don't want to say doubters, but plenty of scrutiny, plenty of people wondering, like, hey, he's the high, again, going into the pockets, which I don't do, but wondering, like, hey, he's the highest paid special teams coordinator, and the special teams unit hasn't been, really that great. Like, what's going on? You got to give Bisaccia a hell of a lot of credit. He deserves a lot of the credit for that blocked field goal at the end of the game, especially when Matt LaFleur in his post-game press conference said, and I quote, that Matt LaFleur said that Rich Bisaccia said Saturday night, and I quote, I will not understand if we come out of this game without a block, whether it was a field goal or an extra point, and then Carl Brooks made it happen. Josh Jacobs echoed that at his locker after the game, saying that, yes, Bisaccia said he would not understand if Green Bay didn't have at least one block, that they saw on the tape that Cairo Santos was kicking and the ball was traveling at a pretty low trajectory, and they set it up and made it happen. Saw that the left side for Chicago was the weak spot on that field goal unit, got the push enough for Carl Brooks to get his paw up and get a mid on it, and Green Bay escapes 2019. So I don't think you can give Carl Brooks the credit for making the play and Green Bay's front on that field goal unit for getting the push, but Rich Bisaccia gets a hat tip there too, and he gets some credit, and he deserves it. Because when things have gone south, whether it was with Anders Carlson in the kicking game last year or Braden Narvison early on this year, and there's been other, head scratchers like when Jaden Reed backpedals and receives it inside his own 5-yard line, and then Keyshawn Nixon lets him bounce, and it takes 15 to 20 yards more of a bounce for the opposing punting unit. Like, there's things that have been picked apart, and it's been fair for the most part, I would say. Obviously, there's some that take it over the top on social media. Rich Bisaccia deserves a hell of a lot of credit for dialing that one up and helping Green Bay get the 2019 win. 7-3. Can't complain. Can't complain about the record. Can't complain about the win. There's still a lot to clean up for the Packers. We'll have a snap count video coming out later this week, and then obviously as the week carries on, we'll look ahead to the matchup this Sunday against San Francisco. It is Mitch. I am on YouTube. Appreciate all the support as always. We'll see you next time.